Hi, folks. Nick Tockert here with the Historical Fencing Guild. Now, before we get into our good stuff, I have to pay some bills and give my buddy Thesis a chance to fix what's going on with his system. We are trying to get things working, and it sounds like they've got some tech difficulties. So while they're doing that, let's go through the plugs. Remember, we are brought to you by a generous support of both indiecd.org, the Independent Creator Directory, and Patreon's, the Historical Fencing Guild's Patreon, where good folks for as little as $1 a month can help me train people, get my settings back up, and get everything running. We are supposed to have a guest being BladedThesis, aka Kǎiláng, but we're trying to sort out some technical difficulties on that end. So as part of that, you may hear my beeps going. So we are there. I'm going to keep the chat up and running, and we're going to go through what's going on real fast before we get into attempting to keep things on the up and up. It's one of those days, folks. First off, I have been working on the grounds to get things ready for next week's practice, hopefully. Still no confirmation on who may or may not be showing up. If it comes down to it, Mandy and I will just have a grand old time, and we'll sword fight for you. Darn it. Lord knows I have enough rapiers for it. But it is a battle, and we're going to fight it. Now, I will be shooting some more videos very soon based on what we haven't been able to do yet, being the repair video on the rapier, some basic. We're going to go back over some things because people need it. If I can get all the trainers out, so that might be a day of thing. I want to do the back scratcher video because people have been asking for it. And then we'll see who can show up for this first practice. If like I said, if it's rained out or nobody shows up, I will shoot some other content, and we will make it work some other way. But I live in service of my community, so we're going to try to make that happen. So speaking of service to the community, let's go through the chats real quick. And we've got Cindy kept waving. Hi, Cindy. She got here early. Foxy evening. Good evening, Foxy. This will be along shortly. He's going crazy with setup. Yep, that's why I usually try to verify the setup a while ahead and send you the link. We'll make things work. He just needs a webcam, so he's not dealing with stupid old laptops. Our Wi-Fi is being wonky. We had an emergency to find a thing. I'm going to add him to the stream. And we're going to see Thesis. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll go through the chat, the rest of the comments, because there are only a couple, and we'll get into you and what's going on. Apparently, it's not liking the video content.
Apparently not. The website kept crashing on me with the video on our laptop, so I don't know.
Okay, well, we'll work around it. So entertain while they well, you guys didn't have to entertain long. We got things fixed. Bareback scratching is OnlyFans content, Patreon at least. Oh, there will be no barebacks. No one wants to see bear of anything, Johnny. But I'm glad to see you in the chat. So, by now, everybody who watches this channel should know Thesis. That's BladedThesis. Do you want to tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do on the off chance this is their first video? And everybody watching, especially since we have a guest, please like and share this. I know you guys are subscribed, but
yeah, I suppose I can put a little bit of stuff out there. I'm not very active on most social media. I have Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and that's about it. I dabble in photography a little bit, but mostly it's Chinese martial arts. I've been doing it since I was 16, I think, 15, 16. Started out with learning 7-star mantis in an old Chinese guy's garage. Then
that's the best way to learn, I think.
Oh yeah, then he passed, and I took a break for probably 3 or 4 years, and then picked up Tai Chi and Bagua, and I've kind of meshed the styles into this weird Franken style that most people don't really understand.
Well, that seems to be the natural progression to anyone who is a studying cross-training practitioner. I can speak the English language, folks. Really, I can. But now, the reason Thesis is on today, aside from I love having people on and the fact that he is a fairly accomplished martial artist and one of my Patreon supporters, hint, hint, ton of breaks. If you want to help me keep the lights on and do some of the cool stuff I'm planning to do, consider $1 a day. And I'll take $1 a day, but even $1 a month helps. So, Thesis, you not so recently, though it seems like it, about what, a year ago now, had an accident.
It was a year ago this Sunday.
Okay. And why don't you tell folks about your accident and how it affected you, and then we can go into why we're talking about it.
Sure. So last year was the very first time they had a Renaissance fair in our tiny little mountain town. So when I first heard about it in January, I was very excited to go because I'd never been to one.
Right.
So I spent the next 4 months just planning what I was going to wear and everything like that. And we got there basically Saturday morning. It was like 11 o'clock. And they had a poster board set up showing all of the events that were going on that day. And there was one at 2 o'clock that they called Sword School. I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. So we'll go check that out. So we went and had lunch and came back just in time for the Sword School to start. And there were 3 or 4 of the armored knights that were sponsoring the event, teaching a bunch of probably 8 to 14-year-olds how to fight with wooden swords.
Oh, that's fun. That's a great age to work with.
And then immediately after they were done, of course, they wanted to fight with some of the people who were in attendance. And earlier in the day, I met a guy by the name of Andrew, who was decked out in some pretty good Scottish fare. He had a kilt and he had an arming sword, and he was kind of up on the stage. Now, I call this a stage, but it's really not. It's a hole in the ground. The stage itself is at ground level, and then they dug out like 4 or 5 steps underneath it.
Okay.
For the front of the stage. That's where all the kids were standing, is in the pit. Well, Andrew was up on the stage, and he was being swarmed by like 6 to 8 kids. So I took it upon myself to attempt to take some of them off of him. And three little boys and 1 girl started attacking me. So I'm moving around the outside perimeter of the stage and ended up in the pit walking backwards. Not the smartest thing to do.
I'm listening.
I'm usually pretty good at spatial awareness, but this one particular time I wasn't aware how close I was to the stage, and my foot hit the bottom stair, and I fell backwards, landing on my left hip on the corner of the top stair.
Ooh.
And I tried to stand up. And immediately my vision started going fuzzy and started seeing black in the corner of my eye. So I sat back down. And a EMT came running over, and they asked me a whole bunch of questions. And it was probably halfway through the questions that I realized that my left foot, instead of being pointed forward, was pointed completely to the left. And I attempted to straightened my foot out, felt some pretty excruciating pain, and then stopped trying to do that. Got a ride in an ambulance, got to the hospital. They took x-rays. They thought at first that it might be just dislocated or sprained or something. And no, it popped, cracked right off at the head of the hip. And the force of the fall had twisted the bone in my leg. So that's why my foot was pointed the other direction.
Okay.
So the doctor tells me that they could try and pin the hip, but I would be in the hospital for 4 to 6 weeks, and I would be unable to walk for 6 to 8 weeks, or they could completely replace the hip and I'd be up and walking the next day. So that was obviously a pretty easy choice for me.
Right.
So I woke up the next morning and had a new hip, and they told me probably 5 or 6 months before I could even attempt to go back into trying to continue my martial training, which was quite a blow to me. I was not happy hearing that. But I did my physical therapy. I did everything I was supposed to do, and now I'm mostly back to where I was before.
Wow. There is so much to unpack on this. And I want to talk about this because part of what we specialize in is adaptive training. Mm-hmm. And part of what we specialize in, and I am now obligated to break this conversation into 2 distinct chunks, much like your leg and hip. But
yep.
A lot of people want to know about how to get started teaching as much as learning. And let me ask a question. Who paid for your repair?
I'm on like government assisted Medicaid, so it was all like taken care of that way.
Okay. Because there are, as somebody who's been around some of this stuff for a while,
mm-hmm.
there are so many levels to that situation, because I'm hearing aspects of the story I've never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people ask me, why am I so anal about certain things? Why do I go through all the effort of trying to put list ropes up and have waivers and other such materials? This is exactly the kind of reason why, because there is so much tangled in that one exchange. Because you had kids, I assume, with wooden swords.
Yep.
Barely supervised.
Pretty much.
You had a site that was incredibly, shall we say, unstable.
Oh, yeah.
As horrific as what you went through is, that could have been so much worse.
Oh, absolutely.
Because any of that could have happened to any of the children.
Yeah.
Lawsuits everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just outside of carefully monitored injury. That incident is almost more terrifying to me than the fall and recovery. So we got, before we get into that, guys, if you're setting up your list fields, this is why we rope off list fields. This is why we have dedicated people who act as referees, and we keep non-coms out because, obviously you have a background both with children to an extent and martial arts.
Yeah.
But they didn't know you from Adam.
Nope.
That's horrific. Funny, looking back in the conversation, but horrific. So I am really, really glad everything worked out mostly the way it did.
Oh, so am I.
So
the
that's
first question that they asked me was, did I hit my head?
Oh, yeah.
Because the direction that I fell, I think if the ground would have been slightly less elevated when I fell back, I'd have cracked my head first.
Yeah. And that could have been fatal.
Yep.
If you look, I scroll that at the bottom. Please remember, martial arts are inherently dangerous. By viewing, you waive any right to hold the creator platform or guests liable for any damages, injury, and or loss of life that may occur. I say that because this stuff can kill you for being stupid.
Yeah.
And when you're setting up and you're getting back in shape, and when you're training, this is why we don't do it necessarily around the public if it's avoidable. This is why we have to be careful. Now, that's going to be a whole show right there. I can feel it coming. I feel myself doing something I haven't usually done, and started lecturing, not out of the front of the book, but out of the near back when we talk about how to set up a list field and why. Because I do talk about this. And the first thing you'll notice is there's a big blocked off single entrance area described that's well lit from the outside. It's almost like setting things up with lots of ropes and barriers is a great way to make sure that, frankly, what you did doesn't happen.
Yeah, we got lucky this year that they moved it to one of our city parks, and they have an actual raised off the ground stage. They had a section roped off for the kids. Of course, they also gave them longer weapons this time, which I'm not sure was the greatest idea, but that's what they did. So
Whew, I don't want to speak ill on anybody, so I'm going to try not to, but good heavens, it gives me a bit of fear for the organizers. Because, good Lord. And frankly, that kind of thing can give a bad name to everybody who does what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be careful, and because honestly, you could have gone to jail if you had hit a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to, on the first level, I'm obligated. Please, I'm not ragging on you. I'm really not. But if you see something like this going on, unless you are in somehow, in an authority like a police officer where you can say, okay, this needs to be broken up a bit, it's not safe. Don't engage, guys. Thesis could have lost his life and could have been crippled for life. He's very fortunate. Because, in that moment, our dear friend effed around and found out. But now what I want to talk to you is, before this occasion, you had not been through any real major surgeries or layouts. Am I correct?
When I was, I want to say 18, I had they called it a level 3 sprain, which basically means I chipped a bone off of my right ankle, but they didn't have to go in and cut anything open, any surgery like that. It was just physical therapy and things like that. So before this, it was pretty much my first surgery.
Okay. And on that previous injury, how long was your recovery?
Well, it was a little bit longer than it was originally scheduled to be.
They usually are.
They first put me in a cast for, I want to say 4 days, because the doctor at the time was out of town for the weekend. And then when I went and saw him on Monday, they put me in a walking boot, and I was supposed to do that for 3 months, I think.
Okay.
They wanted me to do 2 crutches for 2 weeks, then 1 crutch for 1 week, and then walk unassisted just with the walking boot for the rest of the time. And I was off the crutches in probably 4 or 5 days because it just annoyed the hell out of me.
Now, okay, once again, because we are broadcast, I have to say, please, guys, please actually follow your doctor's advice, because they're medical professionals and that sort of thing is annoying. But reckless behavior can worsen injury and make things much, much worse on you and much, much longer. That all having been said, sorry, I have to do these caveats.
Oh, I completely understand. I'm fully aware that it was the dumbest thing in the world, but I was, like I said, 18 or 19. I was young and dumb, and
young and dumb
got away.
Yeah, young and dumb happens, but now in the recovery for this second one, how did it change your perspective on things?
Oh, it completely changed my perspective on everything. I'm much more understanding of people's limitations now. Yeah, like Foxy, and my mother just had her hip done last month. So same hip, same side, same doctor. So I'm much more understanding of people that don't move like I do.
Right. And were there any really aha moments in your development, in your recovery, that really, looking back, it stands out on you?
The first time that I tried to do any kind of simple stances was probably 4 months later. I talked to my physical therapist, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you could probably start doing, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to go into a very basic horse stance, not really deep or anything like that.
Right.
And I hit the floor, and I'm just like, okay, this is not very good. I have to slow down and just take things at whatever pace my body wants me to take it at, instead of what my mind wants to do, because my mind was perfectly fine. And it just was like, okay, doctor said we can go. Let's go.
Right.
Body said, nope, not yet.
And that is something, that is what is a precursor to age. And I think when we survive severe injury like this that lays us out, it's good for us because there's a death of ego, and there's a forerunner. So it motivates us to try to stay a little healthier to stave off what will eventually come.
Mm-hmm.
And starts the mental flexibility of, just because my mind is ready to do something, my body may not be.
Yep.
Now, I have another interesting question, but
interesting.
You live in Utah.
Yep.
How cold does it get?
It depends. If we get a lot of snow in the winter, it doesn't get as cold, but that happens maybe once every 3 or 4 years. All the rest of the time, I think last year while I was recovering, we got a bunch of snow like the week before and the week of Christmas, and the rest of the winter was like single digit cold.
I will be interested to see, because at that point the injury was still very fresh.
It had been about 6 months, 7 months.
Okay. Do you find yourself more susceptible to the weather changes, the barometric changes? Do you feel them more?
Not really.
Okay.
people told me that would happen, but it hasn't really seemed to affect me a whole lot so far.
No, that's wonderful. Okay. Yes. Let's see. I'm seeing some comments. I'm not bringing up Johnny's because it's just a little too spicy on that one. I'm cool with speaking ill. What the heck were they thinking? Yeah. I'm going to have to do a rant, but it will have to be a solo rant. And that one's it's gonna come from way back. It's not right here. It has to percolate. But ow. He's much more mindful of limitations now. This cold hoax again. Johnny, if I ever hit the one of the big lotteries and can get the assorted passports arranged, well, I'll have somebody come down, or I'll come down, pick you up, and bring you up to this area during winter so that you can experience what cold is. But
it's not fun.
Yeah, it's different. But so let's go with this. Your recovery is nothing short of phenomenal from everything I've seen of this sort of thing.
That's what people tell me.
No, it really, really is. Oh, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that you were in excellent shape from regular martial arts work, and you had immediate quality care.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to process how I want to go about this, because you're such the abnormal case of a heavy injury where there isn't a lot of ramification. So it's interesting to talk about because, well, let me ask this. What adaptions do you find yourself making?
I take my time more now because, like I said, my mind always just wants to go and my body is like much slower processing. So before, when I would do forms practice in the morning, I would just shut my brain off and go. I wasn't doing any like set movements. I was just moving my body. Now
Right.
I will sit and think of the next move before I do it. And I'm usually 3 or 4 moves ahead in my mind while my body is slowly going through things.
Now, I would say that is a tremendous gift, because that is very much something you need as an instructor.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be thinking about, the full sentence, the full stanza of the poem, the full verse of the song,
Mm-hmm.
not just what note comes next. Because then you start to understand, when you're analyzing styles, what's going on. Oh, the reason that motion is where it is in sequence is it's setting you up to be in this position.
Mm-hmm.
So that lets you play the physical chess that swordplay is. And I think you're going. Ironically, I think you traded a little bit of physicality issue and probably a shorter active span for a much better perspective. And that really almost has, feel free to call me superstitious, but that smack of the divine, where it's like, no, now you can understand.
It makes sense to me, honestly, because
yes,
before any of this happened, I basically had one student, and that was Foxy. It was all I ever did. Now I'm teaching her, I'm teaching Kitty, I'm teaching my little cousin, and I'm able to see the different levels that each 3 of these people have and look at them as individual students instead of looking at the group of students.
right. I think that's a good. He used to get real. Foxy says, I think the biggest change was his personality. He used to get real impatient with me, and now he doesn't. Like I said, a debilitating injury is something that causes a death of the ego in the best cases. I've long since stated that there are only two kinds of people in this world: those who have met their Waterloo and those that haven't. Waterloo was basically the site of Napoleon's greatest failure, where he engaged in a situation where he could not win. And there was nothing he could do other than lose. And, to tap a phrase from one of my favorite movies, you've been weighed, you have been measured, and you've been found lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And the next question becomes, then what?
Yeah,
And your answer was you went through the early period of I can't make it to the bathroom unaided.
Yeah.
And you
I had a walker for 10 days. I did a cane for probably longer than I needed to, but I didn't know what the limitation was. So I had to just let things come as they went. And even now, I can't do everything that I could do before. And it annoys me. And at the same time, it's like, okay, we'll just have to move things around a little bit, try different things, and find something that works.
And let's see. Johnny says, hard to understand a situation you've never been in, huh? Yeah,
Exactly.
No, that's exactly it. And I work with a lot of people, and exactly, Johnny, he could understand when I said I can't do that. I work with a lot of people with limitations and a lot of people who have been blessed to be healthy their whole lives. And they just don't realize what it's like to be at that bottom and have to climb back out again.
And I was definitely at the bottom. I could walk, but that's about all I could do for the longest time.
And I from a couple of my situations, I have been there, and I know what it's like. And there are experiences you only find from that. One I love is the stretching hallway, where you're trying to get somewhere that you've walked 1,000 times before, 1,000,000 times before, down the hallway to the bathroom or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you take the first couple steps and you realize, like, your mind starts processing how much more effort it's going to take to accomplish this totally menial task of going down the hallway.
Or up the stairs.
Oh, God, yes. Oh, up the stairs. Up, yes. Absolutely. As somebody who's still on a bad day, I went out today, and because my wife's truck, she got a Ford Expedition, an old Ford Expedition. And shockingly, not many people know this. My wife is a couple inches shorter than me, but she actually has longer legs than I do. I have a very long torso for my size. Short legs, short arms. But to get in, I have to, with any measure of comfort, I have to remember to bring my walking stick, and I halfway pole vault my way into this truck. And things like that will probably always be something for me. I look at staircases and hills and things within a level of assessment that people who've never had to think about it don't.
Mm-hmm. I'm the tallest person in my family. Both my two siblings are shorter than me. My dad and my mom are shorter than me. So I was kind of looking at things from a higher elevation, if you say.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
Now it's like completely different change of perspective, because I drive a big ass purple Dodge Ram, and I couldn't even get in that thing for probably 2 or 3 weeks. And there are running boards.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take my good leg, step up on the running board, grab the handle,
Mm-hmm.
pull myself up, sit down, and then I'd have to grab the bad leg and pull it into the truck. And that became such a habit that I still find myself doing it now, even though I don't need to.
It's not a bad habit to get rid of, because that way you're trained for exhaustion in that leg.
And I've definitely experienced that a few times too.
Because I don't. It's a trade-off. It is a loss of innocence, and I want to get into something that Cindy said because it's tied to this.
Mm-hmm.
But when you never had to think about it, you couldn't imagine having to think about it.
Nope.
But once you have to think about it, you can't ever not think about it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just like there are a lot of people who deal, and this all feeds into what, I talk to you guys and I beg you to pay attention, for threat assessment. And people think, threat assessment is the guy who's packing on the corner, not realizing threat assessment is far more likely to be an unlevel stare that you wouldn't notice if you don't pay attention.
Yeah.
And being able to process that means you never get the freedom of feeling like you can run free unharmed, because you realize that. And ironically, it's very akin to what happens when you've endured certain kinds of violence. If you've never been carjacked, it's something abstract to you until you've been carjacked, and then it's a reality. It's why they've done studies, and I cannot remember where I read this, and I feel like a bad internet provider, a person, but on a primal level, people are more scared of knives than they are of guns.
It's true.
Very, very few.
Study.
Yeah, so very, very few people have been shot when looked at the proportion of people who have been cut, by accident or intent. So a knife to the vast majority of people is a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And a gun is somewhere between a fantasy, a nightmare, and a possibility. It's interesting to see how that affects everyone. But
yep.
Because this process, and this is why I incorporate, and I really wish Alec was watching today, but this is why I incorporate so much logic into my self-defense discussions, and why it's always about perception. Because I want to keep you safe, and keeping you safe this is why I drill footwork. Because if you learn your footwork while fighting, you're less likely to hurt yourself while you're not. And you're far less likely to hurt yourself while you're fighting. And I get these, well, I'm a klutz, so often from people who, no, you're not. Do you have something physically that is throwing off your center of balance? Malformation of the legs, some kind of growth that's causing things, inner ear disorder? No? Then the reason you are a klutz is because your mind is somewhere else than keeping track of where you are in space. That's not a moral thing, it's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it's born from multitasking. And what you will find is people who've endured kind of injury like Thesis has, what you get is these moments of crystal clear monotasking. And I'm a big monotasker. I'm all about monotasking. You know, I find a lot of life is a lot better if you're doing only one thing. And you know what you'll see that when people are talking, and then they get to the foot of the stairs, and it's really interesting to see somebody who's been hurt or has an injury versus somebody who doesn't, because people who don't always, you know, they kind of go up the stairs, but people who've had to deal with an injury, there's always this pause of, okay, there are the stairs. I'm going up the stairs. And it's sort of like, you know, turning the radio off so you can read the street signs better. You know, your mind focuses in, I'm doing on this one thing for this minute. And, you know, a lot of times conversation will pause. I see that with a lot of PTSD guys going through doorways, military guys. They will, you know, conversation will stop as they approach a door and until they're through it. It's interesting to watch. And understanding why can really give you, these are survivors. This is the wisdom of a survivor. The wisdom of a survivor says you can fall down those stairs. You will if you screw up. It is no longer a possibility. It is a hard fact. So that's something that needs to be kept up. Now, it gets interesting when we have to deal with people who aren't involved and the mental equivalents. So I want to drop into what Cindy said real quick. Cindy says, yeah, I don't have a memory of most of my childhood because I was on some major anticonvulsants. Very similar. My mother got annoyed every time she asked me if I remembered an event that happened when I was a kid. Of course not. Then she unfortunately had a reaction to a combo of fully leaded coffee and Sudafed and lost her memory for 12 hours. Now she understands what not remembering childhood is like. And then Foxy gets it, doesn't remember half a year because of meds. I also find sometimes I lift my right leg with my hand when getting into a car because I used to use a cane when I worked teaching in retail. I don't now, but sometimes it's still totally unnecessary because we develop these safety measures, and they are akin to poker tells. So when we are assessing an opponent, being able to read these, if one is, especially in a self-defense situation, is really good to know. If it looks like they can't pivot on that ankle, boy, you know, tactically in real world situation, you want to be making sure that they're working that ankle for any exchange you have to have. It's sort of predator vision, you know, and when you've endured injury, you can see it in yourself, so you have a chance to be able to see it in others, both for good and for bad. So it's interesting. And again, I'll give you a recent one. For those who don't know, I developed severe carpal and cubital tunnel and diabetic neuropathy in my hands and arms and feet and legs, on top of several other things. And for a period of time, I lost the ability to walk in anything like a real gait and hold anything smaller than about the size of this, although I could have never held this weight. It takes two hands to hold about a liter of pop. I have the arm strength, but not the hand strength. Because of that, I'm always careful with how I pick things up. I'm careful with what goes. And and the pain is something I got used to, and I do my physical therapy. But I got a call from my mom, and she had developed carpal tunnel, and she had to have some work done on it and stuff. And she said, "I'm sorry, I took it for granted. I didn't. I'm sorry. What was it? I wasn't more appreciative. I didn't understand what that kind of pain feels like."
It definitely changes your perception of things when you're. I didn't realize how much I used my hip until I couldn't.
Oh
And
yes.
now, just taking my dog out, I have to walk down the stairs to go outside because I live in a second floor apartment. And before it was just go downstairs. Now I'm fully aware that there's a stair that's probably second or third from the bottom that has a catch on it. It kind of tilts slightly forward when you're walking down. I'm much more paying attention to that stair than the entire rest of the stairs now.
And see, this all feeds into the trick is to develop vigilance without straying too far into hypervigilance. Because you don't ever want the process of analyzing to be so encompassing you can't do anything else, or that it impedes your function. The kind of trauma that causes long-term PTSD, and there are two types of PTSD, I think, and there are a lot of better medical terms and stuff, but there's the PTSD from a single traumatic event. And that tends to cause a single sharp type of phobia and things that rattle out from that. But there's another kind of when you are consistently and repetitively in danger, in pain or both, from injury and such, that you start to develop the ability to analyze situations much quicker and much more constant. And your brain sort of turns on and loses the ability to turn off because you're always in that fight or flight because you're terrified you're going to slip into the freeze. And I think certain kinds of injury, certain kinds of trauma really affects people. I work with a lot of ladies who have had, frankly, had to suffer sexual assault. And some of them, it's repeated as parts of other forms of abuse. Some of it, it's a single horrific incident. And I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other or anything like that. But it teaches you to you're always aware. But the problem is, you get all this information, but you don't know what it is or what to do with it. Because your senses are alive, but you haven't gotten additional processing unless it's, very early in your life. And if it's very early in your life and very protracted, what happens is you end up with somebody who essentially becomes an empath. And they have learned to feel and anticipate the emotions and reactions of others before people do. So often I will know when, say, my wife is angry or anxious about something before she's even figured it out.
Yeah, I've had probably a handful of incidents in my life. The first happened when I was in, I want to say, kindergarten. I got bit by a dog on the way home from school. And so up until I started dating Foxy, I was terrified of every single dog in existence. Right. It didn't matter if it was a big, huge St. Bernard or a tiny little Chihuahua. If they came running at me barking, I lost it. I couldn't move. I was frozen, terrified, because of this one thing happening when I was like 6 years old.
Right.
And then the other one, I think I've told this story on the Facebook page, but I was dating a girl in high school who, not to mince words, but she was mentally abusive to me.
Yes.
I had to walk around on eggshells around her. She threw a glass picture frame at my head because she caught me talking to another girl in class. And I dated her for 3.5 years. So I had 3.5 years of this kind of abuse. And then I found out towards the end of our relationship that for 6 months previous, she was talking to on the phone and bankrolling her ex-boyfriend to come down, stay in a hotel, and visit her.
Uh-huh.
So I couldn't talk to any other girl, but it was perfectly fine for her to talk to someone else.
Right.
We broke up the week before Christmas, the year after my grandpa died on Christmas morning. So I was already emotional. She went back to this person she'd been talking to.
Of course.
And it took me months. I was like emotionally destroyed that this girl was no longer wanted to be with me.
Right.
It took me months to like get out of that funk and start hanging out with the friends that she didn't approve of before. She didn't want me hanging out with those people because they're a bad influence.
Well, and the bad influence was they were likely to help you see through the gaslighting. And the horrible thing about a narcissist is narcissists are a form of abuse, but they're also deliberately addictive. They master the art of love bombing and gaslighting to make you believe that they're the only ones who could love you.
And that's exactly it. That's exactly why I was for 3.5 years.
When you've had to deal with people like that, what you internalize is all the negatives, and they stay internalized for a long time, sometimes forever.
Still to this day, I'm overly critical of myself because of the things that she said to me.
Right, and there's a part where if you're not careful, it's really easy to be waiting for the other shoe to drop from anyone who's nice that you care about.
It's been over 20 years, and I still find myself. And the thing that actually happened is, so she started going back out with this guy. I started hanging out with my friends again. I was walking home, something I always used to do. I had a friend who lived clear on the other side of town. We both had cars, but we would walk to each other's houses. Yeah. So I'm walking with him on Main Street. Here's the funny thing. This incident actually happened on the same block as my hip. It happened on the same spot. But we're walking. It's
maybe you should avoid that spot for the future.
Yeah, maybe. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, so there's not a single other car on the road. It's like the middle of the week.
Right.
And I hear from behind me a vehicle approaching. On the other side of the road, I could hear this. It was a very big truck. The guy that she was seeing drive a big, jacked up pickup truck. So I see him approaching me. He stops the vehicle and within probably 5 seconds reaches under his seat, pulls out a Glock, drops the visor, grabs a clip, racks it, points the gun out the window and says, "Stay away from my girl." This was the first time in my life I had ever had a gun pulled on me. My friend, who was in the National Guard, dove over a potted planter and took cover. Me, I ran across the street. Now remember, this is a jacked up pickup, so even if he fired, he probably wouldn't have hit me. It would have gone over my head. I ran across the street, jumped up, grabbed his wrist, and with all of my weight, just dropped and snapped his arm. I heard his arm break. And then when the threat was essentially neutralized, I'm like, holy shit, I could have died.
Yeah.
He could have shot me in the head.
And see, that's the case of that shouldn't have worked.
No, it shouldn't have, but it did.
And you were incredibly fortunate, but it also, you have to be careful because that can make you, you pulled it off once, so the back of your brain can think, maybe I can do it again.
Yeah, if I'm ever in that situation again, which,
because the guy jumping to the other side of the Potters, that was good. I mean, that's solid training right there, because he's not just getting concealment. Those Potters with some dirt in them, that might actually warrant some cover. I mean, that was the right move.
These were thick planters, like concrete, big. He was like, what the hell did you do that for? And I'm like, I don't know.
Seemed like a good idea at the time. But
it really wasn't, though, because if there would have been a car coming the other direction, I could have gotten hit by a car, because from the moment I saw the gun until I came back into my right mind, nothing else mattered. So if there had been a car coming the other direction, I could have gotten hit by a car before I even made it to him.
See, the first time I got shot at was in junior high, and I took refuge between a couple dumpsters at great speed, but no heroism there. I've had a lot of people pull guns on me, mostly police, and not because I've done anything rowdy, but because I'd get stopped by them. Or there was one time I was taking care of a behavioral client who had a behavior in public. And I basically had to stand between the cop and him and go, look, he's behavioral. If you let me deal with him, I can deal with him. Please don't shoot my client.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have one story where I was dumb, but it kept me alive. It wasn't even dumb. It was no thought. And that was when I was at I don't like telling the story, but I was at a rest area. We were kind of rest area park thing.
Mm-hmm.
Missinawa Spillway. Beautiful. And I went into the bathroom and I bumped into a guy who was coming out. Totally innocent on both our parts. But he started to clear leather. I freaked out. He was tweaking or something.
Probably.
And I blinked. And by the time I was done blinking, I had my left hand securing his firearm back over his hand, back into the appendix holster he had his gun in. And I had my knife at his throat. And because I had just stepped forward into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably, he would have shot me. I could see it in his intent. But I was standing there and he was standing there and we were looking at each other and I could still see him clearly. I could draw him. I could smell him too in my mind. It's kind of scary. And I asked, can we just be cool? And it was scary because the voice that came out of me, it was like somebody else was talking. It was just, man, can we just be cool? And I'm standing there and I'm like, if he twitches, I'm going to have to do the next part to that. And I really don't want to because I'm guaranteed to take him out, but I don't know if I can take him out fast enough before he can clear, because if he falls backwards, he can clear and take me. And I didn't like those odds. I really didn't want to die. Overall, not dying is one of my things. I'm really fond of not dying.
Yeah, don't die.
But I remember standing there. It was the longest time. And I watched him kind of come back to earth. And he nodded. And I realized, okay. And it was stupid to let him walk away with his gun and everything. But I did because he had a drastic and sudden mental readjustment. And then I wanted to leave, and I listened to my buddy, and things got hairy because he wanted to hold up and defend the picnic yard. Absolute idiocy. And ended up with my wife and I just saying, well, you're on your own, we're leaving. And we got in our station wagon, and I got to drive through campgrounds at unholy speeds while tweaked out, I don't know what his buddies were chasing us, but everything worked out okay. But no, I don't like guns.
I despise guns.
Well, no, let me. I want to qualify that. I got to qualify that. It's not that I don't like guns, because I don't blame the gun. I really don't.
Stupid person behind the gun.
Yeah. And the thing is, if he didn't have a gun, he would have pulled his knife. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't have a knife, he would have grabbed a rock. There was malice in that individual. And at that moment, and if he was just a big guy, he would have just tried to jump me.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, I've been careful about how I go into doorways, into the bathrooms, even more so than I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And my point to all of this is, you develop hyper awareness. It just comes with it. And if you don't know what to do, it will exhaust you, and it will make you. You'll jump at the wrong things. You'll see the wrong things, and you won't see the threat when it's real. Like a little kid coming home from a scary movie, jumping at all the shadows and not realizing they've walked out in the street. You know.
Yep.
So, learning what we do serves to do is teach where to put it. Teach you to be aware of your circles, and I love the movie The Mask of Zorro with Anthony Hopkins and Antonio Banderas, and it's one of the finest sword fighting movies. But he gets the circles wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes me like sick angry. Because when I believe in concentric circles, and you control radiating out from you, and the first thing you have to do is control your thinking. And it gets real hard whether it's control your thinking or control your breathing, because they both live side by side. So what you have to do is be aware, are you breathing? And are you breathing right? That's the question everything has to start with. Because if you're breathing fast or you're holding your breath, you need to get some air in, or you need to modulate the air coming in. Your pulse is going to do its thing, but if you control your breathing, you get the blood circle, your brain gets a little closer to something you can control. And you can control your thinking, it makes it easier to control your body. And that's just internal.
Mm-hmm.
Then
That's
you control the circle
what I do
that you can reach.
That's kind of what I do when I get a new student. Before I even go into any kind of martial arts or anything, I start with breathe. That's it.
Yep.
Breathe. And then we'll go into basic stances, and then just kind of continue on from there.
Well,
breathe.
Instruction and learning to fight really does go through. It's why I love and I teach, why I include melee early, because unlike the vast majority of people that I've met when it comes to what we do, being in my case Western sword-based martial arts,
mm-hmm.
they want to teach from the perspective of a one-on-one duel first. And to me, that is so far down the line that's almost an afterthought. At some point, you have to talk about, the fighting, and you fight with dealing with an opponent. Preferably not the opponent. The opponent logic is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you start from a melee perspective and you have these kind of experiences, you're learning to control your circles radiating out. So you're taking the wisdom of being a survivor, and you're applying it either from it being naturally generated as how can you get a circle wrong? Which way you work your way through the concentric circles. The new Zorro movies, Cindy says, annoy me because sword fights were bad, but because they spent so much time going into Destreza and they don't fight it, because there were only a few people who could, and they wouldn't let them, because Destreza is not nearly as showy as Italian or German saber. And in movies, you see a lot of Germanic saber. I really dislike melees. It plays into my dislike of crowds. More accurately, don't trust people getting behind me. And I'll get into that in just a second. I loathe crowds, but I do better with thesis with me. Well, obviously, you have backup and very large backup. I love melees better than one-on-one, because it's in one part, it's much easier for me to care. Because if I have a one-on-one conflict, my brain is yelling at me, you haven't tried to de-escalate yet. Which sounds ridiculous, but it's like, if it's one person, what can we do to prevent you from this happening? Man, what kind of verbal judo can we do? Are you looking at your woman? Yeah, she looks just like my cousin Peggy. I'm sorry, it's really weird. She just she's the spitting image. You ever meet Peggy? She's nice,
That was the thing about him pulling a gun on me and telling me to stay away from his girl. I had completely cut off contact with her. I hadn't spoken to her.
No. Well, that is something with history and dialogue. That's a whole different ballpark. What I'm talking about is the kind of stuff that idiots who have no background with you will use as an excuse to try to start a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
These are things like, you staring at me, you looking at my woman, you think you're bad or something. These whole the language of Dragon Ball Z. If you ever watch Dragon Ball Z, and I love the old Dragon Balls, don't get me wrong, but there is never a point where they can say, let's talk this out. Well, my power is more powerful than your power. Okay, cool. You know what I mean? There's no de-escalation, because that's what the show's about. And there are a lot of people who come into conflicts, especially when they're intoxicated, expecting that script. What are you, a coward? Absolutely. I am absolutely a coward. I don't want to go to jail again.
Yeah, I guess that it's not entirely true that those two are the only instances I've had, because there was the one student in one of the kung fu classes,
right,
that always came to class in camo pants and big puffed up chest. And
did you have a Krav Maga guy?
Tang Sudo is what it was.
But I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't remember what it's from. One of the I know. Oh God, what's his name? Ramsey Dewey out of Shanghai, China. He's a MMA coach, and he tests a lot of defense video techniques to see if they would have any effect on anybody. But one of the characters he has is a Krav Maga guy. And you essentially describe the costume and bearings of Krav Maga guy. And I'm not
Yeah.
bashing on Croft, because real Croft practitioners
He
are
took
hardcore.
Mantis from my Shifu.
Okay.
I was taking the class, but at the same time, I was assisting in the class.
Right.
And because my Shifu had faith in my abilities, he would stick me with the problem students.
Right.
And this was definitely a problem student. You know, he'd come into class every day talking about how useless everything we were learning was. And I just want to learn something to be able to kick ass. And, you know, that kind of
Right.
stupid mentality. And we were learning the 4-point block, which I showed in that video last summer.
Right.
And for whatever reason, he decided to throw his 4 punches at full speed, full force, just because. And I just bam, 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 blocked all 4 of them. And then I decided to return in kind. And I punched him in the face.
Now, see, and again, this is the challenge of, when we are training, we have to not sink down to their level if we can avoid it. Although there are times where a certain level of assertion must be applied.
Yeah.
Especially
I kind
with
of
that kind of student.
In this particular instance, it was necessary to show him a point.
Right.
Because
before
that,
to borrow, yes,
he had we were learning something else. I don't remember exactly, but in this particular class, Shifu would teach us a form, but also teach us application of said form.
Right.
So we were learning one of the moves in the Mantis hand form.
Right.
And I was, of course, paired up with this guy. And for whatever reason, he had got it in his head. And he's like, well, what if I do this instead? And Shifu looks at him completely stone-faced and went, you could try. And it took him a second to realize what Shifu was saying. You know, he was saying, go ahead. We're all watching. Let's see what you can do. And
now, that's also common, especially when they're not trying to take the course. They're trying to prove they're better. And I've had several people like that come through. I had one gentleman who insisted he had the skills to be someone I would say could instruct, in that he knew the background, but he did not have the mentality. And it offended him that I did not trust him. Because he just didn't have the mentality. Because as a trainer, you have to do things like, you're going to take hard shots from your students, not because they're trying to hurt you, but because they don't know calibration yet. This is why when I look into my armor, you know, for a while there, I was catching a lot of flack. You seem to over armor versus everybody else. Yes, because I work with the new people. And
that was the other thing that he did when he was no longer, well, he was still teaching at the college, but he was also doing like freelance teaching. And there's a little studio kind of 6 miles away from us where he was teaching. And I was assisting over there too. And he would always stick me with the new students. Now, in this case, we were teaching elderly people, and mostly elderly women. And he would just take the new students that had just shown up that day and went, go over there with him. And when he declares that you're, you know, good enough or whatever, you can come and join the rest of the class. So he always put me with new students or problem students.
yes.
And the amount of time that those overlapped with younger men is a flat circle.
Oh no! Well, it's ironic because that was very similar to my my training early on with my first instructor. But because what it was is, you and your instructor both know the basics,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, beyond the basics, the order of curriculum gets very important. And this is why I'm so picky about training first and deciding who trains when. Because I've had people come in, well, I'll show you the shot. And it's a shot that they weren't ready to learn, and it completely throws off their training. Not all young men, but we all go through an arc of that, I think. But
yeah.
it's just a sliding scale of stupidity. But
I think
the
I was
other
on the
thing
far
is,
end of stupid, but that's just me.
when you have somebody in your role at that point, they need somebody who knows the basics and can't teach beyond it because they don't know it. And what they can do is do the, dare I say, grunt work of getting people through the basics, so that when people need finer tuning and higher level application, the master, the higher instructor, can do it. What happened with me was my instructor gave me the people he couldn't waste his time with. It was a very unkind version of it. Hormones don't just mess with girls. That's true. They make us all of us do the dumb at different points. Yes, but in my case, I was able to rapidly assess what was wrong with some of these people's form or approach and make them functional. Much to my instructor's annoyance, because a lot of times he was hoping by being away from the light of his glory, they would quit and leave. And
the problem with the way that he ran classes, or at least as far as I'm concerned, the problem with the way that he chose his assistants, is he was in the military in Taiwan, and he thought that we needed to be able to do 1,000 high kicks and be able to do horse dance for 20 minutes. But I was able to learn the Yang simplified 24 Tai Chi form without ever attending the class.
right.
I watched a handful of Foxy's classes and learned the entire form just from watching her.
There are two things to factor in. One, you're a bit of a savant, and I think that's something you're very proud of, which is why it was so necessary for you to be humbled.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Wow.
Oh, no. I completely understand.
You've been in the circle long enough that you're starting to get, glimpses of the true Nick style. Once I've built somebody up enough, it's like, okay, now let's start working on the chisel. But the other thing is, to borrow a bit from 13th Warrior, how did you learn our language? I listened.
Mm-hmm.
That style is how I got as good as I did. Because what would happen is, if I wasn't fighting, I was watching the fighters.
Yep.
And I was watching the heavy fighters and the light fighters. I was watching the old dudes, and I was comparing, what are they doing different than the young people? And I didn't care about who won. I didn't care about the showmanship or the egos or the identities, or that's Duke Sewer so-and-so. I just watched the forms and went, well, I can't do that because they're using the height advantage. But that I can do. Okay. And I went home and I drilled the basics. I mean, hundreds and thousands of shots a day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hundreds of shots a day, thousands of shots a week, just putting the work in. And that's what it takes, and that's what it takes to get back. You have to understand that when you're getting back, a set of 5 shots from each guard every other day may be all you can do. You may need a whole day of recovery from that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no shame in it.
Oh, no.
And that's the part people lose track of. Because, let me think. I had the double hernia because I was crushed under a ton of hamburger. And I had to do a sit-up to not die. I dislocated most of my spine. Had to reset for all that. My knees gave out. I had to reset for all that. I'm in the process. So this puts it basically my fourth from being physically unable to operate back up to being able to instruct again. So I've done this 3 to 4 times. Heavy. Having been knocked all the way to the I cannot make it to the bathroom unaided to I'm going in a week to be hopefully hosting a practice. And that process,
Yep.
it forces you back through the gates of wisdom all the way to the basics.
There's a quote at the very beginning of the game Jade Empire. I don't exactly know the exact quote because it's been a while since I played it, but it's something like defeat is a better teacher than victory because it forces you to remember why you lost. When you are constantly on the winning side of something, you don't ever think about why did this happen or how. It's just, okay, I won, time to move on. But losing makes you go back and go through the entire exchange and look at why did this happen? Why did this happen? Why did this happen? All the way through the entire fight. And that's basically what happened to me.
And it's interesting that we have that because, and yes, we will be wrapping this up very soon. I'm holding up quite well, but we will be wrapping this up soon. I want people to realize and go back to a story I told I was reading. I think it's one of my Kung Fu Tai Chi stuff. Guy looks out. He's been doing Tai Chi for a few years, and he sees his grandfather. And, this guy just learned one of the long forms. Like one of the 120 move long forms.
Uh-huh.
And I will tell you, my mind with the ADHD does not process that way. It's why I don't train that way. And I am in awe of the people who do. But he looks out and he's talking to his dad. He goes, I'm worried about Grandpa. His dad goes, why? He's been doing the 5th move for an hour now.
Mm-hmm.
Just over and over again. And, he watches him, and he does that for however long, and then eventually moves to the next and does it again. And his dad laughs and goes, you don't get it. He doesn't need to learn he's no longer learning the form. He's understanding the form.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And especially in Eastern schools, because the vast majority of Eastern training was basically lost. A lot of it had to be rebuilt.
Yep, it's true.
A lot of it had to be interpreted by scraps. And the problem is the scrolls and the writings were, in many times, deliberately had gaps so that the wisdom couldn't be stolen. They didn't explain why.
Nope.
And you have this. You're doing a maneuver, but people don't understand why. That's why 95 to 98% of Tai Chi practitioners will never be able to combatively apply what they're using.
Mm-hmm.
But that 2 to 5% out there are scary dudes, because you have to understand what it is. And the other thing that people really don't get about a lot of Chinese fighting styles is Europeans have, you learn a hand-to-hand style, and then you learn a weapon-based style, and then you learn a marksmanship-based style. Kind of, everything is encapsulated.
Mm-hmm.
And feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the Asian model at its core is you learn a weapon and you teach what you would do with the weapon in a way that you could still do it open-handed. So it often looks odd in some of the movements that seem to flourish.
That's very true. A lot of the empty hand styles, unless you put a weapon in their hand, people are going to just be like, well, why is your hand in this position instead of being over here? But the problem is, with the European model, you have manuals and treatises from the 15, 16, 1700s.
Absolutely.
But with the Chinese styles, that's just not there. And the little bit that is there, like you said, is completely without context. I attempted many years ago, probably 20 years ago now, I got a booklet of a compulsory Olympic wushu sword style. And I'm just learning from this book. But the book does not tell you about the in-between. It tells you, okay, well, in this pose...
we have to step back. We have to stop back because you've wounded me. You have cut me to the quick, my friend. Because you have said one of the most unclean words in any spoken language. You said wushu style.
Oh, it was, though. It was Olympic wushu.
Yes. And what happened was, we got to look at the history of communists taking over in China, wanted to wipe out martial arts.
Mm-hmm. Make it a dance. Yep.
And in part because they didn't want the population to be able to train against them. And given that you had things like the Boxer Rebellion, which everyone should read up on, because it's very humbling for martial artists. It's a good reality take.
But the problem with that book is it told you, okay, do this pose, then do this pose. It didn't tell you how to go from
no.
this one to this one.
It's funny because you're talking about the European styles, and I hate to disillusion you, but a large number of the armored styles are things like I.33, which there's no text, and the craziness that is Talhofer, which is interpretation and subtext from someone who Talhofer was something else. But it's not till you get to the Renaissance era of masters that you get masters who are starting to codify into curriculum. And we have to understand that education, as we think of it now, is still only about a 200-year-old experiment.
Yeah.
But no. Oh God, wushu. They deliberately took the weapons and made them these wibbly wobbly nightmarish things. It's
which sounds cool when you're doing the form, because there's a lot of
and the form looks great, but it's so much wasted energy so much of the time. And even now you'll see people who it's like, why are they doing that? Just get a little closer. And the problem, a lot of that comes from there isn't sparring in a style. And I will tell you guys this before we go on. I don't trust let's see, school where I'm going into, where I'm learning does go into just not how but why. I can tell by the way you perform it, Cindy.
It's very, very impressive when you actually put those videos up, Cindy. I really have to, because watching the way that you alter the form, and I can tell. I can tell that you've altered it to fit your body instead of altering your body to fit the form. But it is very impressive because it's still the same form. It is still fluid and beautiful, and I love it every single time. I have to throw that out there.
No, thank you, because I feel the same way. For me, I see a lot of, there are two approaches to training. There is this is the one way. You will learn it. This is how we fight. This is what we do. This angle all the time. And that style makes it almost impossible to transfer it to women fighters. It makes it impossible to transfer it to people of different heights or body types. Or you have the approach of, okay, this is what it is. These are the beats. And it's taught like a song. And you learn it musically like you're playing a song until you go to perform it. And then your own embellishments happen. Your change happens. And the more you do it, the more you make it yours. And that's part of the progression where new styles start to fork off of different styles. At its earliest root, everybody who's an individual fighter is going to do that. Now, there was one other exception, and that is when the form is so simple and so condensed, anyone should be able to do it. Now, somewhere I have VCD1, yes, I said VCD, of the Chinese 7-point style that I wanted to learn. Okay. And the reason I didn't learn it is I never got a hold of the second VCD.
Well, that would make a difference.
I got to see it, but I didn't get to see it. And what it is the ultra basic Chinese martial art they teach or taught at certain periods as part of basic training.
Okay.
Everybody learned the same thing. Mm-hmm. And you get to learn, and that was made so that, frankly, any idiot can learn to defend themselves because it was designed for an army of conscripts, people who were forced into the military.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to be set to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
And thus I find it fascinating. That's why I want to learn. Like, well, this is made for the dumbest, weakest fighters, but so we can all teach them to hold their own, and then whatever. I'm like, that interests me.
See, I had something similar to this is the only way happen when I made the mistake of posting a recorded video of me doing a sword form to YouTube. Oh, I had one comment. One single comment from someone saying, "You should be ashamed of yourself. This is not how we learn it in my school, and you're doing it wrong, and you're an insult to the Chinese sword." Okay.
I have had so many comments like that over the years.
And the video's still up. It's still there. And
yeah, it's a mistake. Yeah, I haven't seen the comment. I could. Johnny wants me to find this video and have words with this gentleman, but I'm sure it's old enough. There's no point kicking over a hornet's nest. But
it's pretty old, yeah.
I find those people interesting because usually, what are you doing? And here's the thing: I always give them the chance to be informative or accurate, because there are some people out there who will look at what we do and go, "You're doing that wrong." What is what is your pedigree? What is your background? Am I talking to someone who is a peer, someone who is a professional or someone who is just blowing smoke because they trained at Joe's Shotokan shack next to the Pizza Hut in the mall. What are we looking at? Are we on the scale of McDojo, military, or just somebody who knows what they're doing? No. The video, posting the video was not a mistake. Thesis you should always feel free to post your videos of what you're doing, even if it's just a save point for your own progress.
If you watch the video, I'm performing on stage with my shifu. We're doing the same form, but there are small little differences.
Oh yeah, okay. I know what video you're talking about then. I'm sorry, when you said on stage, I'm like, yes, I've watched this video. What that is a keyboard commando. And the world is full of them. And you nod and smile and go, well, that's your decision. I'm sorry you feel that way, but have a nice life. If
this is not the way that I learned it. Okay. Show me.
And that's another one. Do you have videos I can see? Maybe I can learn from what you're saying. Or because people don't understand how to, if you approach with sincerity, it messes with them. Because they're looking for conflict. I'm not looking, I fought in a lot of tournaments, and I had this habit of coming in second. And it would be because I'd be at some small event, and I'd be able to handle anybody coming through, and it would be some, Duke Sir God, somebody who's been fighting forever and, has a foot of reach on me. Or, in a couple places, Ego has an infinite armor rating, and if you don't accept legal shots, we're not playing the same game. So,
and that's exactly it, Foxy. I let that one comment bother me for so long that I didn't ever put up another video of me doing something for years. Just because of that one comment and that one person telling me that I was doing it wrong.
And see, that's right there. Only one person in that comment interaction did something they shouldn't do. It wasn't you. I agree with you, Johnny. That's where you have to go and catch yourself, because one, they don't deserve that kind of power. And two, being a solo practitioner has hazards. It really does. It can be very difficult. And one of the great hazards of it is you're vulnerable to things like that because you don't have anyone else to bounce off. That kind, to combat the psychological effect of that is part of why I do what I do. It's why I put out what I put out. Because it's like, I've had people come at me, "You're a gimpy fat guy." Yes, sir. Well, that dude you were sparring with beat you. He should. If someone is 20 years my junior, a foot taller than me and fighting with a sword a foot longer than me, they should be able to, hold their own or defeat me in the game of raw physicality. Anything I achieve is either luck or cunning. And I am not that lucky an individual when it comes to things. So that's why I say, and it's why I'm so supportive, especially of the people who've been damaged by life. Because at that point, you are a fairly strong-minded individual. You were pretty aware of who you were, and that kind of BS was enough to drive you back. And the trolls won that one.
I don't even think the comment is still there, because I turned off comments after that. And I have a handful of videos on my channel, and 3 of them are performances that I did, and the rest of them were just random videos of my old sword collection. I've posted more videos to the Facebook page than I ever did to my YouTube channel.
One thing I'm going to say is it's time. Just set up an old playlist. You know, label this. This is the old playlist. Put the date you originally posted. Put them up there. If people come at you, you can either go, I've outgrown that, or maybe you can learn from them if they're worthy. But I don't think you should hide in the safety of Facebook, because you're becoming the kind of person who can do a bit of what I do. And as you do it more, it will be more likely, where it's helping people find their fight, encouraging them to do things their way, and that it's okay. And that's what the guild is about. That's why this isn't the Nick Talker fight school, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's why I have guests like you and Cindy, and I have had John Miner on a couple times. It's been a while. Work's been busy on John and a few other things. And there are other people I would love to get on here that I respect who've done stuff. And there are other people I want to reach out to who are tied to what we do, and try and get them on more, because it's about building each other up. Now, I do keep it as my channel, and I handle it that way, not as a ego thing, but as the buck stops with me. So when something goes wrong, it's my fault. When you guys do good, it's your fault. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So when you guys level up, when Cindy's doing her stuff, that is on her. If somebody doesn't like something that's been said or aired on this channel, come to me, because that's my job. It's also why I'm so, okay, if you're going to do this, you need to check your T's and dot your I's and know your P's and Q's, because it can be so dangerous, both physically and financially and legally. So there's a balance to be had.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think my hour show is nearly gone 2 hours, and it is quite late. So I think I'm going to have to call it, if you don't mind.
No, it's perfectly fine.
I want to go real quick through some of the comments, and then we'll wrap this up if everybody's cool.
Yep.
And we will see. As you can see, I've been working on my stamina that I'm holding out this well. It's still better for me to keep my shows to an hour, because it's easier on me just for the amount of sitting in my head. But we're getting there. Cindy Kep said, at World Tai Chi Day, a couple guests arrived at the school and were knowledgeable of Yang style. This school teaches Wu. I was practicing Wasin, Wu style fan form, when they arrived. One of them started working on a different fan form, Yang style 18, which was one of the ones I know, but it had a difference. One step I learned never steps backwards. She stepped backwards. Interesting to see the change, but not a challenge or insult to what I know. Exactly. The world is pretty big for differences, and the guild is growing. That's the goal. But I want to thank BladedThesis for coming on tonight, and I want to thank the chat for being lovely. This has been an excellent program. Now, Patreon members, there is a short before video set up of what the list field and facilities looks like right now, as of earlier this afternoon. I'm sorry, yesterday afternoon. I don't think I shot that today. No, because today I had to do some errands. As I progress in getting things ready for practice, I'll be putting up more videos there, and hopefully some more of the requested list of videos. The Patreon folks will get to see these videos a month ahead of everybody else, and some will remain Patreon exclusive just because I love them. If you want to see that, anybody can see any of the videos for as little as $1 a month, because That money gets piled up, and then I can afford to buy things like wood mulch to put down for the list field and things like that. I'm not out here trying to get rich. I'm out here just trying to be able to afford enough that I can do some small reviews and occasionally offset some of the costs that I, and my wife, blessed is my wife, pull out of our pocket to keep this going and to do things for this program. So thank you. With all that, guys, you know the routine. I want you to keep your eyes open so that you can see what's coming, neutralize a problem before it happens. Do your drills so that you're in shape to deal with what you have to do. Be kind to yourself and each other because, friends, it is a rough world out there. And as always, thank you for supporting your local swordmaster. I will see you at the latest next week for the Historical Fencing Guild. And if you care to go over to the Nicholas Tockert YouTube channel, you can see me several times a week where I am promoting writings and authors and creatives, trying to help them build up in a very familiar style of support. Because just like the world needs more warriors, we need more writers too, and authors and artists and game designers and all that. So a little different format there. I hope to see you all over there. Sometime Saturday, being tomorrow, I will probably do a rather lengthy art stream because I am way behind on a project and I would love to get it done by the end of the week. So, with that, guys, I love you. Thanks again for coming on, Thesis, and I'm going to end the broadcast.
Yep.
Have a great night.